They were never meant to look like comfort. When most people imagine angels, they see soft faces, white wings, and gentle light. But buried deep inside the oldest layers of Scripture is something far less soothing, something metallic, burning, watching. The cherubim and the Ophanim are not guardians of sentiment. They are guardians of something far more dangerous. And the question that lingers like smoke is simple. Why would a divine throne need protection from us? The first time we encounter the cherubim is not in heaven. It is at a crime scene. After the exile of Adam and Eve, the book of Genesis places cherubim at the east of Eden, armed with a flaming sword that turns in every direction. This is not poetic decoration. It is a barricade. Humanity's first act of disobedience ends not with forgiveness, but with armed enforcement. Why such severity? If Eden was lost, why station terrifying beings to guard it? What exactly was humanity being kept from? Life, or knowledge, or something more volatile? Later, in the visions of the prophet Ezekiel, the imagery intensifies. The cherubim are described with 4 faces, human, lion, ox, and eagle, and 4 wings. Their legs gleam like burnished bronze. Fire moves between them. Wheels intersect beside them, covered entirely in eyes. These wheels are called the Ophanim. They do not blink. They do not rest. They see everything. But here is the contradiction. In Renaissance art, angels became beautiful. In medieval devotion, they became comforting. Somewhere along the centuries, terror was softened into reassurance. Yet the earliest Hebrew texts suggest something else entirely. The cherubim were not delicate children with wings. The word keruv in ancient Near Eastern context echoes throne guardians, hybrid beings, carved into palace walls of Assyrian and Babylonian kings. Power symbols, intimidation made flesh. Were the biblical authors borrowing imperial imagery? Or were they describing something they believed to be real? In Ezekiel chapter 1, written during the Babylonian exile around the 6th century BCE, the prophet describes a storm cloud approaching from the north, fire flashing, creatures emerging, above them a firmament like crystal, and above that a throne. The Ophanim move in perfect synchronization with the cherubim. Their rims were full of eyes all around, surveillance without limit. It reads less like a pastoral vision and more like a mechanized throne chariot. Some scholars argue this was symbolic theology, a way of describing divine omniscience and mobility. But symbolism often grows from fear. Ezekiel was living under Babylonian occupation. He had seen empires crush cities, deport families, erase identities. His vision of a mobile throne might have been reassurance that his God was not confined to a destroyed temple. Yet even that reassurance comes wrapped in terror. Because the presence of this God does not soothe him. It overwhelms him. He falls face down. Why would holiness require such overwhelming spectacle? Why eyes upon eyes? Why fire within wheels? The Ophanim appear again in later Jewish mysticism, especially in the Merkava tradition, where mystics sought ascent through heavenly palaces. But ascent was dangerous. Unworthy seekers were said to be burned, crushed, or driven mad. These were not open gates. They were guarded thresholds. The psychological undertone is unsettling. The closer one approaches ultimate knowledge, the more destructive it becomes. And yet, in popular imagination, angels deliver messages and play harps. But the cherubim also appear in the Holy of Holies inside Solomon's temple. 2 massive golden figures overshadowed the Ark of the Covenant, wings stretched wide, facing each other. The Ark itself was associated with lethal holiness. Touch it improperly and you die. In 2 Samuel, Uzzah reaches out to steady it and collapses instantly. A reflexive act punished with death. Protection or paranoia? Ancient Israel was constructing a theology of sacred danger. Divinity was not safe. It was volatile. And the cherubim symbolized restricted access. Only one high priest could enter the inner chamber, and only once a year. If he erred, tradition says a rope was tied around his ankle to retrieve his body. The Ophanim, meanwhile, embody something even more disturbing: total awareness. Eyes covering their rims suggest omnipresent observation. Nothing escapes their gaze. In a pre-modern world, this was not comforting. It was accountability without privacy. Some theologians interpret this as divine justice. Nothing hidden, nothing ignored. But justice without concealment can also feel like exposure. Ancient societies lived in constant vulnerability to plague, famine, invasion. A God who sees everything might protect, but he might also judge. There is another layer rarely discussed. The throne imagery in Ezekiel mirrors Babylonian royal iconography. Kings position themselves as divine intermediaries, surrounded by hybrid guardians. By portraying the God of Israel enthroned above even these terrifying beings, Ezekiel may have been making a political statement. Israel's God outshines empire. But in doing so, he adopts the empire's aesthetics of fear. Is this subversion or internalization? The cherubim's multiple faces may symbolize dominion over creation, humanity, wild beasts, domesticated animals, birds, yet their fusion blurs boundaries. They are not one thing. They are all things. Identity dissolves. Categories collapse. In psychological terms, such imagery destabilizes the mind. It confronts the viewer with something beyond comprehension. And that may be the point. When Isaiah describes seraphim crying, "Holy, holy, holy," the thresholds shake. Smoke fills the temple. Isaiah believes he will die. Fear precedes mission. Terror precedes calling. The pattern repeats. Sacred encounter in the Hebrew Bible is rarely gentle. It is destabilizing, disorienting, sometimes lethal. So why did later traditions soften these beings? Perhaps because empires changed. As Christianity spread through Rome, angels became messengers of comfort in catacombs and basilicas. Theology adapted to new political realities. Fear yields obedience, but comfort builds devotion. The monstrous was aestheticized. The hybrid became humanized. Yet the older texts remain. The Ophanim still turn, wheels within wheels. The cherubim still guard thresholds no one casually crosses. And beneath the poetry lies an uncomfortable mechanism: access control, knowledge restriction, sacred hierarchy. The divine is presented not as universally approachable, but as layered, filtered, defended. What does that say about power? In every civilization, ultimate authority surrounds itself with spectacle and barriers. Palaces have gates. Thrones have guards. Secrets have consequences. The biblical God, at least in these visions, is no exception. The architecture of heaven mirrors the architecture of empire. Is this divine truth expressed in human language or human power projected onto the divine? And here is the final tension. The last book of the Christian canon, Revelation, echoes Ezekiel's imagery. Living creatures full of eyes surround the throne once more. The apocalypse does not remove the terror. It amplifies it. Judgment unfolds under the gaze of unblinking witnesses. From Eden's flaming sword to Ezekiel's wheels of fire to Revelation's throne room, the message is consistent. Proximity to ultimate authority is dangerous, not because it is evil, but because it is absolute. We have inherited a sanitized version of angels, but the earliest descriptions suggest beings designed to overwhelm the human mind, to enforce boundaries between mortal curiosity and divine sovereignty. They are not companions. They are thresholds. And perhaps that is what unsettles us most. Because if the gates of Eden are still guarded, if the throne is still surrounded by eyes, then some knowledge was never meant to be reclaimed. Some access was never intended to be restored. Or perhaps the real terror is this, that the barriers were not built to keep humanity out, but to keep something infinitely powerful contained. The cherubim stand silent. The Ophanim continue to turn. And we are left staring back, wondering whether we are being protected or watched.